Good evening, beautiful people. Such a great pleasure for me. Growing up, I found a lot of things wrong in the community. I did not know what exactly they were, but I had a different mindset about how I viewed the environment around me. I'm going to tell you a story about this guy on the bike. This picture was taken, I was doing my national service in Bolgatanga. I happened to be teaching in Bolga. One day, I was riding my bike somewhere. It was a very hilly location. So while I was riding up the hill, it was a very hot afternoon. And I kept riding, I kept going up the hill, and while I was going, I saw people descending. It was a very tedious ride up the hill, taking all my energy, and while I kept going, people were coming down. And I would always pause for a while and look at the people coming down the hill, and I envied them. I kept riding up, until I got to the top of the hill. I finished whatever I was going to do, and while I was riding down the hill at the time, I was able to stop paddling. The stress was gone. I was even able to let go of the steer and just slide down the hill. And then a note just came to my mind, and I viewed this as life. As a young person, most of the times the youth, we get caught in the whole craze, the social media pressure. Instead of acknowledging that we probably are at the stage of our life where we are climbing a hill, we start looking at people who are descending and start envying them. Instead of focusing on our ride up the hill, we start envying people coming down, forgetting that they had also gone through the stress of riding up. So then I paused, I took this picture, I made a note, and I was very much aware that I would have to ride up the hill before I would be able to enjoy the very free descent down the hill. After my national service, I came back to Accra. At the time, my dad just passed away, and I watched my mom, who was a petty trader. I watched my mom struggle to take care of all four of us. I have 3 siblings. I happen to be the third. 4 guys. I watched my mom do her best to take care of us, and it was a very hard time for me. And I made a mental note to myself that if I was not going to be able to give my mom money, the least I can do is not take money from her. So I decided to move to Accra to find a job. My mom happens to be a very strict person. I remember when I told her I want to move to Accra and find a job, she was driving and she just held on the brakes and was like, "Where are you going in Accra? Who do you know in Accra?" And I said, "I'll find a place to rent. I'll start life from somewhere." I mean, one of my plans at the time was that I had watched my dad. My dad was a very interesting person. Anytime my dad got paid and he had money, he was a very likable man. He would come home and play with us. But the moment he's broke, it was like Shao Kahn coming to the home. And anytime he was coming, we'd have to run into our bedrooms. But I didn't like it. I know my dad was a very fearsome person to approach whenever he was broke. And it made the house very moody. And I would watch my dad, and I made a vow to myself that maybe the fruit might not fall far from the tree. So I'm going to make sure that I don't end up broke and have to put the frustration on my children. So I told myself that before 30, I had to make sure that I was financially stable. So, I told my mom I wanted to move to Accra. Then I moved to Accra. I came with a backpack. I had a mattress. The mattress was so thin that I could fold it into a backpack. It was more like a blanket. So I came, the first place I rented in Accra, when I opened both arms, I can literally touch both walls. So you lay your mattress in the room. When you get up from the mattress, you are at the door. And it happened to share a wall with the the washroom of the compound. So anytime people come into the washroom to do their business, you hear all the bombs. And that's the room I started my life in. Then I got a job at the hotel. I got a job in a hotel. I started off in the office. I got kicked out of the office in a very nice manner, but I didn't blame anybody. I knew I deserved to be kicked out because I was a very stubborn person. From my whole life, from primary, junior high, secondary school, I was never able to fit in. So when I worked in the hotel, I had issues all the time. All the time I had issues. And then one day I came in and the general manager called me and he said, Anthony, we want to start a lounge at the airport. And we think you are a friendly guy. We want you to be the one to start the lounge. You know, when the guests come, you'll be the one to receive them and make sure they are okay before the drivers would come for them. And I saw that Holiday Inn had a lounge at the airport. So I thought, oh, great. I would go there. So I went back into the office and my boss asked me that, I heard you've been offered a new position. Would you take it? I didn't even think twice. I said, yes, I'll take it. Then she said, okay. A few minutes later, my replacement was literally standing there waiting for me to pack my things. I thought, oh, that was quick. I didn't know there was a scheme happening. But long story short, I ended up at the airport, and I hold a placard above my head, trying to find customers for the hotel. They will send my food in a takeaway pack, and I find where 2 or more cars are parked. I squat in the middle to eat. And anytime my food did not come back and I go to the hotel to eat, the ridicule was there. People were laughing at me. Hey, the airplanes are looking for you. Hey, what are you doing here? And I had to maneuver through that. But one day, before I even knew what entrepreneurship was, I started reading books. And I'm going to share a few areas in my life where my mindset made the difference for me. There was a time I was working at the airport, and they had broken the airport down to renovate it, so they moved us outside. That day I got there, and I'm like, Charlie, the thing, we are doing it inside the arrival hall, we are shy. Now we have to do it on the street. Then I called my mom and told her that, you know what, I think I want to quit this job. She asked if I had another job on the side, and I said, no, I don't have a job, but I have a plan. Then my mom encouraged me and told me that she actually believed that I was capable of a lot more than I'm actually doing at the hotel. And she said that the eagle does not rest in the nest of a sparrow. So I thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, I actually was an eagle resting in the nest of a sparrow, and I had to move. Before going to the hotel, I was very popularly known to be a multi-talented guy. I could do a lot of things. I got to the hotel, and there my confidence actually died. Because anytime we had programs or meetings and I raised my hand to give suggestions, thinking I was a very creative guy, my boss would shut the idea down, and everybody would laugh at me. And it kept happening over and over again until I actually believed it, that I was not as smart as I thought before coming to the hotel. So I coiled back into my shell pretty much. I never wanted to speak at meetings. I wanted to just be invisible. And I believed at the point that I was not as smart as I thought. So when I left the hotel, I never liked wristwatches. I never got the concept of watches. I never had one. So one day I walked into a shop to buy a watch for the first time, and the watch was 150 cedis. And I thought to myself, Charlie, common watch, why is it so expensive? And I had only 50 cedis on me. So I remembered seeing somebody selling a watch online for 50 cedis, and I called the person. He came and I bought the watch. I put the watch on my hands, took a picture. Somebody saw the picture and asked if I was selling the watch. And unemployed, I said, yes, I'm selling it. And then the guy bought the watch. So it was like a light bulb moment for me. And I thought, whoa, maybe I could make some business out of this. So I called the guy to come back, and I bought 2 of the watches. Then I sold 2. Then I bought 3. And I sold 3, and I bought 4. And I was up and down in my room with a pen and paper, writing things down. My ideas were just going crazy. And I started selling watches at the time. But then I realized that there was an open market. There was nobody who had dominated that space of wristwatches in Ghana. So I like to refer to it as identifying a gap in the market and building a market in the gap. So I wanted to create that industry for myself and dominate it. So instead of selling just watches, I moved to repairing watches. I moved to making wall clocks from dead wood. I would take wood, carpentry shop, do my carpentry work, make clocks out of them to sell. I would break watches down, trying to put different movements, port movements together to make one good watch. So time after time after time, I kept adding value to it in the night. I would stay up, very curious person, breaking watches down, trying to learn how they work. Until I got to a point where I believed that I had known so much about watches, I could spot a fake watch from miles away. I knew the problems that the imported watches had. And I knew how to design watches to dodge those problems. I knew the buyer preferences for watches. I studied watch markets inside out. And that comes to one thing I want to talk about. Growing up, I realized that my mom being a petty trader at the time, I would always come to Makola with her. We come and buy goods, send back to Ho to sell. But then, it was her friends who were bank managers and other people. If there's any bank manager here, sorry. Friends who were bank managers who would come to my mom to borrow money from my mom. So I was always confused that she was a petty trader who was not respected very much. How come she was helping the white-collar job people financially? So I figured there was something wrong with our definition of success. So along the line, I came to identify that until we are able to synchronize what I call my 3 P's of passion, performance, and profit, until we are able to synchronize these 3 P's, I don't perceive success, or I have redefined my success. Let me explain this a bit further. There are times that you watch a program like American Idol, and then somebody comes on there to perform. They come to sing, and sing terribly, that, they just come to ridicule themselves. And you wonder, did this person not know that he or she can sing? But what actually happens is that the person is very passionate about what he's doing. He's not able to synchronize his passion with his performance, and in most cases, the profit does not follow. Let me give another example. There are people who work in very high-profile companies. The profit is there. They make a lot of money. You see them driving all the big cars. They perform. The performance is there. They go to work early, close late. They do their work well. But their passion does not lie in the job that they do. I've met a lot of people who looked very financially okay, but they're not happy with what they are doing. And then there are people who are able to perform very well in what they do. They lack the passion for it. The profit normally does not follow. I came to find a very interesting relationship between synchronizing your passion, your profit, and your performance. And I found myself to be very lucky in that regard, because when I became very passionate about watches, the performance followed. I would stay up night till dawn, studying watches. There were watches that I actually had that when I slept, I kept the watches close to myself. I wake up at dawn, I grab the watch, I keep gazing into the movement, just lost in the amazement of the watches. That's how passionate I was. And I was always practicing. And then the profits followed. So I always try to teach people that growing up, we had been deceived in a way to think that it was only the suit and tie that defined success. So people who had talents had no choice but to trash their talents, and everybody keeps rushing into the white-collar jobs because of the backward thinking that we had about the definition of success. People have thrown their talents away. because the society made them think that unless you are a doctor, you are a lawyer, you are this, you are that, you are not successful. So some people have really suffered that. But I believe that even if your passion is to be cleaning gutters and you are the best in the world at cleaning gutters, there's no way you would find yourself financially wanting. So I took my time to redefine what the definition of success was for me. And also, mentorship has been a very important thing in my life. Denta was here. Denta happens to be one of the people who helped me a lot. Sometimes people ask me these questions. How do I get to meet all these high-profile people? And I tell them, I just call people. The last time Memphis Depay was in Ghana, all I had to do was take my phone and call Denta and ask if she could set up a meeting for me. She doesn't hesitate. She'd always set a meeting up for you, and I get to meet all these high-profile people. But one thing when it comes to mentorship that I believe we do very wrongly, there's a study called Survivorship Bias. The Survivorship Bias is a study that tries to explain, yes, I mean, people who have done great in their fields deserve to be celebrated, applauded, but then we have a very narrow mindset when it comes to mentorship. This study was conducted during the World War II by the US Army, where they wanted to reinforce parts of their fight jets. So when the jets returned from war, they would come and do a survey to identify the parts of the jet that had taken the most damage so they can reinforce those particular parts before the jets go out. So they realized that most of the jets had bullet marks on the wings and the tails of the jet. But the most important part of the jet, that was the engine, did not have bullet marks on it. So the team in charge of this research went ahead reinforcing the wings and the tails of the planes. Then came the mathematician Abraham Wilde, who brought a different thought. That have you guys considered that maybe we don't have any planes that came back from the war that had bullet holes on their engines? Not because the planes did not get attacked at the engines, but maybe all the planes that had bullet marks on the engines never made it back. So why don't we stop and have a more open mind? And instead of focusing on only the planes that came back with damage to their wings, consider the thought that there were planes that got attacked on the engines that never came back. That's why you don't have them here. So they had to have a different mindset and started reinforcing the engines of the planes and not just the wings. And that's how Abraham Wilde was able to convince them to have a more open mind and not have the survivorship bias. So yes, as much as we learn from successful people, mentorship is really important. And people ask me how I handle challenges. When I play video games, growing up, I played video games a lot. And one thing that made me appreciate my period playing video games was that the only way we were able to tell that we were on the right path in a video game was when we encountered obstacles. When you play the Mario game after some time and no obstacles are coming at you, you had to pause for a moment and wonder if you were on the right path. You probably got lost. So I always view challenges this way. That if I'm on a path and obstacles keep coming at me, it was an indication for me that I was going the right direction. And just like video games, before we move from one level to the other level, we always face the last killer of the level, where we have the most difficult challenge of all. So in my life, anytime I have the most difficult challenges, it was an indication for me that I had reached the last stage of that level in my life. And every time I went through that last challenge, I always moved to my next level. Later on, when I started making watches, my new watch shop now, all I want to say before I leave is that I believe so much that Africa, we have so much potential, just like all the speakers before me have mentioned, but it has been our mindset. I speak to the youth a lot, and it makes me sad how little we believe in ourselves. And I'm very glad to have such a platform where we are all talking about mindset, and just to ensure everybody that all the big people that I have known, successful people, none of them were ever considered normal people. Because to become very great and successful, it requires a little level of madness. If it was easy, everybody would have been doing it. And I actually believe that if it is easy, I don't want it. So yes, it's going to be very difficult, but if you have a target for yourself and you work towards it, before I leave, I would want to conduct a little exercise with everybody. I would just want all of us to raise our right hand. Just raise your right hands. Let me see everybody's right hand up. And the second stage of this exercise, this same hand that you have raised, can you raise it up a little further? Great. I have seen that a lot of people raise their hands. Please put your hands down. But just to leave a question with you, why was it that when I said people should raise their right hands up, you did not raise your right hand to the highest limit on the first try? Everybody raised their hands only to a little level. And when I asked that they do it further, they were able to go another level. Just an indication to us that the human body is always designed to find comfort. So as much as we are working very hard, we are programmed in a way to remain where we are comfortable. But wherever we find ourselves, there's always room for improvement. We can always go a level further. If I had asked people to raise the hand the third time, they would have reached a third height. So there's always room for us. We should always remind ourselves that wherever we are only starting. We are not there yet. And yes, I mean, my career, I have reached heights that I didn't imagine. And I always want to say that when I started, I had a lot of time on my hands, but I had no money. After all the hard work, I persevered, I put everything into it. And now I have no time on my hands, and I have no money still. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.